Welcome to the Igniting Impact podcast brought to you by Public Knowledge. I'm Stacey Moss, your host and president of our management consulting firm. Our firm's vision is to be a catalyst for change, leaving each person, project, client, colleague, and community better than when we started. The Igniting Impact podcast is an opportunity to share what our clients and our partners do daily to make a difference in the world. And this season's theme is all about change. Change is everywhere. It's in our work, in our systems, in our communities, and within ourselves. This year, we're looking at ways to approach, manage, and adapt to change. This can be on our projects, on our teams, and in our organizations, or our communities. Today, I just want to welcome two guests to our podcast. We have Bridgette Bell, who's a Senior Administrative Officer at the Mississippi Department of Child Protection Services. And then we have Doug Swisher, who's from Public Knowledge. And thank you both for being here. Let's start by just getting to know you each a bit more. Bridgette, if you want to start and just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here and what you do for work.
I have 21 plus years experience with state government. I have been with Child Protection Services now for a little over 4 years. Before that, I was with the Department of Human Services, and so at that point in time, CPS was inside Human Services, but we've now since separated. So I have a little bit of state knowledge, and then most of my background is in finance. I also have public policy and administration for the rest of my college or career background, I guess you would say, but majority finance.
Great. And Doug, what about you?
I'm an accountant by trade, CPA or inactive. My license is inactive, but I have over 30 years plus of human services financing background. Prior to joining PK a little 5 years ago, I was the Assistant Commissioner of Finance and Budget for the Tennessee Department of Children's Services.
Because our theme this year is all about change, we're trying to get a feel for our guests about kind of on a personal note, what are your values or kind of how do you approach or shape change in your lives, both personally and professional? Bridgette, would you like to go first?
Personally, we've been going through a lot of change in my family. Both boys have gotten married this year, and I had a baby. So we've gone through a lot of change, had a lot of wedding planning. Professionally, I would say we've also gone through change because we've been building finance here at CPS from the ground up. And so before all of that was done at Human Services, and so it's really good to be a part of that and watch us as an agency grow. Also, from a family perspective, watch my family grow. So I think just growth and having that impact across the state, professionally and personally, is a really good impact for change.
That's great. Doug, what about you? What principles or values shape how you approach change?
Ultimately, change is always happening. So from a family perspective, I've got 3 young kids, 9, 7, 6, so they're changing constantly. So,
and if you don't go with the change, you get left behind.
And pivoting is such an important word these days, professionally too. So great. Well, today we're here to talk a little bit more about the financing side of the agency and the work that we've been doing in Mississippi. So tell us a little bit more, Bridgette, about kind of why you undertook this. I know you talked a little bit about the agency splitting off, but tell us a little bit about that and what challenges you had at the beginning that you were trying to solve.
Oh, well, lots of challenges. We were one agency. So before I worked over here at CPS, I did work at Human Services. And so I started out as CFO over there and then went up to Deputy of Finance over there. So I was familiar with CPS, didn't really see the day-to-day or wasn't involved in the day-to-day, but I knew what the finances looked like, had to review the reports and just that high-level overview when I was on that side of the house. I will say that once I came over here, it was completely different. You don't really understand the full impact of what you're working with or what you're working for until you're here inside the work. That has been really eye-opening for me personally. But from a finance perspective, we had to hire people. All of our finances were done on the other side at Human Services. So I basically started from zero. We had to rebuild each unit over here. Also, we had to make sure that we were doing the federal reporting right. We had to redo and separate our cost allocation plan, which, PK helped with that. So it was just a really big undertaking as far as there had not been a new state agency started in the state of Mississippi in years. And so everything was kind of a trial and error with us starting over again. And so DFA, which is our finance organization over the state, like they even had so much turnover at that point till none of them had been able to be involved in the building of a new agency like that. So it's been a huge impact getting us off the ground.
So outcomes, it sounds like setting everything up, kind of getting the processes in place, cost allocation and reporting correctly. Were there any other goals or outcomes that you were looking for?
We also, in the middle of all of that, had our first Title IV audit that we had not had one in years because of all the COVID. So, we had to go through all of that. So just lots of change, but also any like audit perspective from the outside entities, like all of that was fresh and new. And people would say, oh, well, this is the way we've always done it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best way, right? And so us just putting our policies and practice in place to know the best outcomes that we could provide.
That's great. Doug, for people that are not accountants and have not lived and breathed financing for human service agencies, could you give our listeners a bit of information on what cost allocation is and kind of the federal requirements that states have to go through?
So each agency in state government or even nonprofits that receive federal funding, whatever, have to have a cost allocation plan. So that cost allocation plan sets out and describes how the agency or the department is going to allocate cost to the federal benefiting programs. And so there are methodologies that you have to do to gather costs, and then methodologies that you do to allocate those costs so that the benefiting programs are charged the
right amounts. Yeah, the right amount for the right services. And then would one of the outcomes also be, I know at least with some of our other clients, it's trying to maximize the amount of federal dollars that the state can get and are eligible for. Is that part of this project as well?
Right. Yes. And so again, when you do this cost allocation plans, there's myriad of different ways that are okay, but then to do these plans, but you want to do these plans in such a manner that it does maximize the federal dollar that is the state or department
getting. Yeah. What is the impact to maybe communities or families or children who are served by the agency of kind of having the finances and the cost allocation plan right and the reporting right? Like, can you connect the two for our listeners?
Yeah, I think just the families that we serve probably is the best connector. When there's parents that can't provide for their kids, they can't provide the housing, or if they can't provide the food or whatever the case may be, to connect those two things, that's what I always tell our finance staff, is that we are the support. So we may not be on the front lines doing what our social workers do, but at the same time, we have to be that support and that backbone so that they can go out and do their hard daily task. And so connecting those 2 points with us just being able to provide and support our staff is the main thing that I say that we do that is worth the task.
Anything else that you've seen, Doug, from other states that might kind of tie the financing into impact to kids and families and services?
A few states, including where I came from in Tennessee, we had performance-based contracting. So that, and those contracts did was incentivized an outcome that the state wanted, and either penalized a provider that was getting that outcome or rewarded that provider for getting the outcome.
Yeah, the carrot or the stick. And are there
in Tennessee, our performance-based contracting for out-of-home care, basically 3 non-negotiables in those contracts. It was, we wanted to reduce the number of care days, increase permitted exits. Okay, so that's exits that the federal government recognized as a permitted exit: reunification, adoption, guardianship, and then we also wanted to reduce the reentries into care.
That's great. And I think, part of, I think, the financing piece in the child welfare system is also making sure that you have a large continuum of care and that the services that you're looking for you can find, right? And that takes dollars, but it takes dollars in the right places, I'm assuming as well. Have you seen any of those challenges in Mississippi?
Yes, we have. We've actually been working on our continuum of care in the state and trying to get new contracts up and running for those. So yeah, we have had issues with that. The focus has been on our out-of-state kids that we couldn't find placements for in-state. And so just making sure that we have everything here that we need in the state has been a chore.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of rural areas as well, which I know is a lot harder when you're trying to find care for families in their locality. Well, what types of things are you watching or measuring to ensure that what you guys are doing with the cost allocation, the financing, is actually having the impact that you want it to have?
That's sort of the latest thing around the cost allocation plan is we've implemented your cost allocation plan. There are obviously tweaks that you continuously do. Some of the things we've done around those, obviously, then making sure that things around RMS that measures the activities that the case managers are doing, and then it allocates those costs to the benefit programs. But even calculation of the administrative penetration rate for foster care, we worked with her and discovered that what you had in the numerator when you calculate a penetration, you have a numerator and a denominator. Obviously, the denominator for foster care is every kid in care.
Yeah.
The numerator for foster care is for those kids that are 4E eligible that had maintenance payment. And then within years, other adds to that, and they weren't taking full advantage of the adds to that would increase that penetration, because ultimately 4E is only going to pay for their share of a eligible cost instead of not the whole cost, but their share, obviously. And so that's done by calculating the penetration rate for administrative costs.
And so, like with a cost allocation plan, some people think, oh, well, once you have a plan, you can just let it be, right? Yeah. But I mean, since we submitted our plan in 23, we've made 4 different updates to the plan. One of those, we just actually got our FFPSA plan approved by the feds, and so that's going to be a change going forward. And then the KINGAP piece.
Is that kinship care payments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the FFPSA and the Family Preservation Services Act, they got the plan. So have to make changes to their RMS to include those activities for those.
Any other measures or data that you're watching to see if you're having success?
I mean, we look at caseloads every single day.
And looking at the caseloads for both the workforce and then also for how much money you're able to claim, or is it really just looking at the workforce?
No, I think both.
Yeah.
Obviously, some of the things that we've done around penetration rate and watching those things and then monitoring stuff that is and isn't getting in what you call your CAP Plus system, wherever identified revenue that you weren't claiming or whatever, and that actually just even the penetration rate.
Yeah, I would say just over the past year or so, we've increased penetration rate, 4 percentage points. We went from 41 and went over at 45, so
that's great. So you gave me one example of things that, changed with FFPSA that you had to kind of update your plan, because we know that change isn't linear, right? We have a plan, but then things come into play. Are there any other times where you've had to pivot or kind of rethink your approach that might help our listeners think through their approach?
I think we pivot every day. I think from a perspective of 4E in general, like it's a complex funding stream. We're just now getting involved into the legal representation piece and what that claiming looks like. And so I think we are ever changing, but just from the ability to draw down more and do more for the state. So I think like the parent rep and legal rep, those are some of the things that we've talked about lately and what we're doing going forward with that.
And obviously the out-of-state Medicaid, helping with that to help cover its costs for the Medicaid eligible children that are placed out of state. They were in Medicaid, and then we've actually had conversations around target case management as a possible additional funding source for the agency.
Integrity case management's one of those things where we're still trying to get it off the ground and get it in place. We have had a push with our Medicaid organization trying to get the kids that are currently out of state covered. And so I think that would be one of the things that we can push for over the next year.
Yeah, there's so much in the human services area that overlaps, right? Because you've got the child welfare funding, but then there's also Medicaid because those kids are likely on Medicaid, so you're working on that claiming as well, it sounds like. Is there any other funding streams that you guys are working with as far as blending or braiding?
TANF, from the human services side. So the agency gets a sub-grant from human services. And so that would be our other piece that is interagency connected.
Okay, so let's kind of reflect back and kind of lessons learned, Bridgette, maybe over the last 4 years for you and Doug over the last 30, if you don't mind. But if you look back at the work that you've been doing around human services financing and the changes that you've gone through, are there any lessons learned that you would give to maybe a new CFO at a child welfare agency or human service agency? And, here's what I would give you as far as advice.
Yes, there's going to be lessons learned, good days and bad. You can't be everything to everybody. That's something that is one of those things that I personally had to work on. And sometimes not knowing is okay. And so I think back of all the times that I picked up the phone just to call Doug and say, "Hey Doug, what do I do here? I don't have the answer." And it's okay for us not to have the answer.
Yeah. Doug, any lessons learned?
Yeah, early on in my career, it became super evident that I needed to understand the program aspect of the agency.
Yeah.
Because you can't help guide the finances to where unless you understand the programmatic. So glean as much information as you can in regard. Obviously, I'm not trained as a social or whatever, but I soon will know more about the program because ultimately what you want to do is be able to guide, one, maximize the revenue that the agency can get. But then once you maximize that revenue, you want to direct those resources to the outcomes that the agency wants to achieve, whatever that is.
Tell me more about that. How do you do that from an accounting or finance perspective, the directing the resources?
Well, one is performance-based contracting is one of those ways that you can help direct the resources to it. But it's also, you have to know what you want to achieve, and then it's then directing those resources in the best way that you can, whether it's more preventive services type of activities, whatever they'll prevent kids from, like for instance, coming into care, things like intercept, or even obviously all the stuff that you're going to do and agencies are going to do under FFPSA, all those evidence-based programs, whatever ultimately they're directing. But you have to pick the ones that are unique to your state. It's not a one size fits all type of thing or whatever. It's unique to each state, and then within the state, there are going to be areas that are going to need different services. You've got your service areas in Mississippi, but other regions or counties or whatever, you're going to need based on the resources that are currently available to those areas, but then also what the children and families need in those particular areas.
Yeah, that is unique in kind of each of those areas and each of the states.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, each state's different, but then within a state, there's like many states.
I'm also realizing as you're talking, I think you're exactly right. Like if you're in financing, you're doing the accounting, knowing the programs and the casework and the work that you're, figuring out how to fund is important, but probably vice versa too. Like I'm thinking, of the leaders that we work with on the programmatic side, they have to understand at least a little bit, if not a lot, about how to fund that and where the money comes from and how much money there is and how to describe things or document things in the right ways, right? So there has to be very intertwined, I would imagine, between the two.
Well, and I would say that we look at like all of our funding streams as a whole, and the federal agency provides what's called a program instruction, which tells you what you can and can't do with those funds, right? But we look at that across all of our funding streams and see where the money's at in its entirety, and then what fits best under each one of those. And so you may be providing services with one agency or one contract that's on multiple, could be paid under multiple funding streams, but which one does it fit best with? And looking at that all the way across instead of just looking at one funding stream and say, oh, I can do XYZ, but it's better for a state to look at everything from its entirety.
Yeah, agreed. Any other lessons learned from either of you that you would give advice?
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, that's such a good one. Yeah,
That's my main one.
yeah, such a good one. Okay, well, what has surprised you the most about this work? Is there anything that has stuck out and surprised you as you've gone along?
Well, when I first started here, I was operations officer, and that's what started to, I was literally came in reviewing policy, but now back into the finance world and looking at everything, but also now that I'm that senior administrative officer for the agency, Kim Wheaton is my counterpart, and she's the senior clinical officer. And so just learning the other side of the house and what that looks like, and when you get called on the weekends in the middle of the night for support for a kid, you don't think about all of the other things that goes into it whenever you're in the finance world. So now that I am the senior administrative officer, seeing those other things and the other pieces, it's really eye-opening to know what all we do here on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's great. Doug, anything that surprised you?
When I was with Tennessee, you knew that other states were different, but
You didn't know how much? I'm looking at your face right now. I'm like, yeah, I agree.
even things like, state administered systems to county administered system, but even each county administered system is completely different.
Yeah.
So, we have 50 different states and there are 50 different states.
Yeah, 50 unique unicorns. Yeah, that's so true and such an important lesson. So, okay, well, as part of the change theme, we're also kind of focusing on leadership. So before we conclude, I'd like to get your thoughts on advice about leading change and advice that you would give to other leaders. And I just have 2 questions. The first one is, what is your advice for leaders navigating the complexity of changes in today's world? What advice would you give?
I would just say, change is hard for most everybody. Since Commissioner Sanders has started here, we have had lots of change over the past 4 years, changing from counties to service areas, and then we moved into our assistant deputy commissioner structure. So we've had lots of structure changes, and even building our new CWIS system or MACWIS system is currently undergoing, and that has been like a 3-year project. And so everybody, they get excited, and then it's like it's never going to get here. And so I just think being in the middle of it, but also doing what you can to assist and to help with the change however you can, whether that's support or whether that's getting in and getting your hands dirty, however it is, you just have to be open to the change. That's the first piece.
Doug, what about you? Advice for leaders on navigating change?
You need to understand that not everybody's on the same page with change and that are at different levels in that change.
Yeah, we talk about the messy middle, right? Where you have everyone going through the change and you have some that are jumping for it and some that are like, no, I never want to do anything. Or you talked about this is how we've always done it, and then people all the way in the middle. How do you get everyone over that? Yeah. Okay, and then the last question is just how can leaders empower their teams to innovate and adapt in times of uncertainty?
I think that's one of those things we have been trying to empower our staff, but also at the same time encourage, even if it is just from take a breath, right? Take a deep breath. Commissioner always talks about wearing our cape. And so compassion, accountability, professionalism, and excellence. And so that's part of us trying to tell our staff that we have your back, but also you have the children's backs in the state. So, I think that's the main thing. It's just sometimes you gotta take a breath and then start again.
Yeah. Hold on to your seat. Doug, any advice for how to empower their teams and innovate and adapt in times of uncertainty?
Just by nature, child welfare is. If you're talking about just child welfare, it's an uncertainty world. It just is, and so you've got to be able to adapt to that. The people that are actually more resilient in that, or whatever, are the case managers.
Lots of change, probably just not as emotional of change. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah, I always love to say in the child welfare world, we live in the gray, right? The gray and the ambiguous and the change. And it's if you don't have the ability to adapt and you don't have some resilience, it's kind of hard. It's hard to stay in the field. Well, thank you both. I really appreciate you both sharing your stories and your insights today. It's been really fun learning a little bit more about what you're doing here in Mississippi. Before I close out, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners? Any final thoughts?
I don't think so. I just thank y'all for being part of the change with me. That's a good thing, and it's always nice to know that somebody else out there has your back. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you both for your time. It's been a privilege to be here with you, to connect, to learn, to grow, to breathe, and to share. Until next time.